Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Stanford Program on Turkey webinar. I am Ayça Alemdaroğlu. I'm the Associate Director of Program on Turkey at Stanford and a research scholar at the Center on Democracy, Development, and the Rule of Law. So launched in 2020, our program is a platform for critical analysis and research on politics and society in Turkey. We bridge the worlds of scholarship and policy to understand and foster the conditions of just, sustainable, and participatory development in Turkey. Through research projects, speaker events, and conferences, our program seeks to examine and disseminate knowledge about Turkey's changing internal dynamics and external relations in connection with global and regional developments. So please check our webpage for publications coming out of our program and join our list to learn about our events. We will be sharing our link. Today's webinar is our last event of 2021. Our topic is US-Turkey relations, and our guest speaker is Oya Dursun-Özkanca. She will help us understand how we got to this current state of affairs between US and Turkey. She will address the main causes of the rift behind Turkey and US relations, covering the developments in the aftermath of the failed coup attempt on July 15, 2016. And she's someone who has been following Turkey's foreign policy for a long time, and she authored many influential publications. She will also make some policy recommendations for us. Dr. Dursun-Özkanca is a professor of political science and endowed chair of international studies at Elizabethtown College. She's also she's a visiting scholar at Harvard University's Weatherhead Center for International Affairs. So Dr. Dursun-Özkanca got her PhD at the University of Texas at Austin. Her research focuses on transatlantic security, European Union, Southeast Europe security sector reform, as well as peace operations. She's the author of 2 books, Turkey-West Relations, The Politics of Intra-Alliance Opposition, published by Cambridge University Press in 2019, and The Nexus Between Security Sector Reform, Governance, and Sustainable Development Goal 16, an examination of conceptual linkages and policy recommendations, published by the Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance and Ubiquity Press in 2021. She's also the editor of the European Union as an Actor in Security Sector Reform, published from Routledge 2014, and a co-editor of External Interventions in Civil Wars, again from Routledge in 2014. She has also written a number of scholarly articles in leading peer-reviewed journals, including Foreign Policy Analysis, Civil Wars, European Security, Journal of Intervention and State Building, and so forth. She was a visiting fellow at London School of Economics in 2013, received grants and fellowships from multiple institutions, including Georgetown University, the European Commission, the American Political Science Association, and Mellon Foundation. She is the inaugural recipient of the Crider Prize for Teaching Excellence at Elizabethtown College, and the recipient of the Richard Crocker Outstanding Service to Students Awards for 2 years, actually, 2018 and 2020. Dr. Dursun-Özkanca is currently working on her next book, manuscript on Eastern Mediterranean regional balance of power. Today, she will speak about half hour. Then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. Please write your questions in the Q&A box. We'll try to attend to all. Okay, the floor is yours, Oya.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alemdaroğlu, for this generous introduction and to allow me the floor to speak in front of such a wonderfully distinguished audience at Stanford University and beyond. Today we are going to be talking about Turkey's relations with the United States. And I would like to start by noting that Turkey has been, for a very long time, traditionally recognized as a very important and staunch ally of the United States and the West overall. So, for instance, Turkey has become a member of the NATO alliance only after 3 years after its foundation. Turkey has been a founding member of the Western European Armaments Group, which not many people know about actually, which is the predecessor to the European Defense Agency, which is a procurement agency for the European Union, Defense Procurement Agency. And Turkey has been a member of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe ever since 1973. Turkey has become has applied to become an associate member of the EEC, European Economic Community, back in 1959 and signed the Ankara Agreement in 1963, and finally has been granted a EU candidacy status in 1999 at the Helsinki Summit of the European Council. And in 2005, Turkey has opened up its accession negotiation chapters with the European Union, engaging in EU accession negotiations process. So where are we currently in terms of Turkey's relations with the West? Turkey, I would like to remind everyone that has fought with the Western allies in the Korean War and has suffered significant casualties just to prove its worth to the Western alliance at that point in time, giving it access to the NATO alliance. Like I said, during the Cold War, Turkey has been a very staunch and reliable ally of the West, and its strategic location vis-a-vis the Soviet Union has really proven a very important and key asset for the Western alliance, so for the United States and its Western allies. So fast forward a couple of years, after the end of the Cold War, there has been a period of trying to find its identity, and the Western alliance has also been overall trying to really find its identity in the aftermath of the demise of the Soviet Union. And we have seen actually that Turkey has been also still signaling to the Western allies that it is ready in support of the West. For instance, we have seen the 9/11 tragic terrorist attacks in the United States, and Turkey was among the first countries to renounce these attacks and state its support for the United States. So we have seen after this period, we have seen certain issues that kind of muddied the waters in Turkey's relations with the United States. The predominant episode that I'm referring to is the 2003 SAC event, also known as the Hood event in Turkish foreign policy, where a number of Turkish special forces have been captured by the US special forces in northern Iraq, causing a significant rift between Turkey and the United States, even briefly actually, because it was after a while the situation was sorted out. And however, in the Turkish psyche, it really certainly made a deep impact in terms of thinking about Turkey's relations with the United States. And on another topic, fast forward a number of years later, there was the attempt to really make sure to present Turkey as a model for the rest of the Middle East because of its Muslim majority population, Greater Middle East project where Turkey as a Muslim as a democracy with a predominantly Muslim population could really, in the eyes of the Bush administration, W. Bush administration, could be really presented as a good role model for the rest of the countries in the Middle East. And so there were problems with that, I think, because, and I was making my remarks on that as much as I could in all the talks that I was giving at the time, that, Turkey has a very special situation, right? It has been a westernized country, ever since its foundation, wanted to really well embed itself in the Euro-Atlantic structures, and it has this Western way of looking at the world, and so on and so forth. So just to package this country in a way to really promote it as a Middle Eastern country had some fundamental mistakes in the assumptions. So that, I think, really started the idea of Turkey serving as a role model for the rest of the Middle East on shaky ground. So, and Turkey, it wasn't well accepted by the countries in the Middle East. So, fast forward a number of more years later, we have seen the zero problems with neighbors policy of Davutoğlu, and this has been really appreciated by the West, I think, and Turkey seeking to engage in trilateral, bilateral negotiations, trying to resolve some conflicts, engage in networking, diplomatic networking. So that was appreciated by the West. And then Arab Spring took place, and with the Arab Spring, we have seen the start of some trouble, as Turkey and the West were not really seeing eye to eye with each other as to what the best measure to respond to the protest movements and rebellions in the Arab world. So that has created certain problems. So this book, the first book that I published in 2019 with Cambridge University Press, Turkey-West Relations book, the idea of it started at LSE when I was a visiting fellow there in 2013. It in fact started as a Turkish foreign policy in the Western Balkans type of a book. Then I expanded the scope of it to include multiple additional case studies, including Turkey's Turkish foreign policy in the Western Balkans, Turkey's veto over EU-NATO security exchange information, Turkish energy policies, Turkey-EU refugee crisis, Turkey-EU refugee deal, Turkey's rapprochement with Russia, as well as Turkish foreign policy in Iraq and Syria. So basically, what I did in this book is to propose a new framework called intra-alliance opposition. So that framework basically uses IR literature, international relations literature. And I made the argument that, most studies of Turkish foreign policy really failed to entrench themselves in theoretical study of Turkish foreign policy. So I used soft balancing literature as a springboard, and I used the tools of statecraft that were used in the soft balancing literature. Soft balancing, by the way, for our audience members, refers to the use of diplomacy, use of economic power in balancing your counterpart, so counterbalancing your counterpart, but it is traditionally referred to as balancing between friends. So that is soft balancing instead of military measures and really more forceful use of power, you are really using institutions, you are using diplomacy, you are using certain economic tools of statecraft in order to balance your relationship with your allies. So that is soft balancing. And if I were to kindly request the audience to be shared the Venn diagram that I shared with our organizers.
Of course.
Thank you, Art. Wonderful. So here you can see this is the figure that I used in my book. And basically what I did was to really categorize these different tools of statecraft that are identified by the soft balancing literature into 3 different processes of intra-alliance opposition. So here is Turkey serving as an ally within the NATO alliance. And here are 3 different processes that I have identified. One, boundary testing, the second process, boundary challenging, and the third process, boundary breaking. So here are some of the tools of statecraft that are already discussed in the soft balancing literature. So what I did in the book was really to to identify what these tools of statecraft are and what they mean and how they interact with each other as well. So the sole purpose of this Venn diagram is to show the audience and the readers that there is a continuum between different processes of intra-alliance opposition. So if you look at it here, in boundary testing basically means that you have allies that are trying to understand what the acceptable forms of behavior, what are the acceptable standards of behavior, norms of behavior between the allies. So that is boundary testing. So through different policies, you are trying to understand and identify what the lines are in your relationship, what are unacceptable, what are acceptable. And then in the second process of intra-alliance opposition in boundary challenging, what you see here is that you have an ally that is increasingly challenging the boundaries of this alliance relationship, but still signaling at the same time that they are willing to operate from within the alliance. So, you have an ally that wants to act independently to a certain extent, but wants to still operate from within the alliance in boundary challenging. And in the third process, we have boundary breaking, and that boundary breaking basically refers to the fact that allies may not necessarily see eye to eye with each other, and they are increasingly signaling their willingness to operate from outside of the alliance. So this is mainly done through countervailing alliances, so through engaging in alternative alliances. So basically, these are the 3 different processes of intra-alliance opposition. And as you can see here, there are intersections between the tools of statecraft that are used in different processes. So what I did was, using the 6 case studies that I outlined in the beginning of my talk, I tried to examine which of these case studies, which of these cases employed what tools of statecraft. So over time, I have a table in the book as well, which is an excuse for our audience members to purchase the book. I have shown that over time, Turkey has engaged increasingly in boundary breaking type of behavior. So it started with the Turkish foreign policy in the Western Balkans, which was mainly boundary testing type of a thing, active diplomacy, entangling diplomacy. And then it ended up with Russian rapprochement, as well as on security and defense affairs, as well as Turkey indicating its desire to at least be an observer, if not a member member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, as well as, more importantly, Turkish foreign policy in Syria, and how it really creates all sorts of disagreements and major sources of mistrust and grievances on both parts, both Turkey and the United States. So here you can see the evolution of this relationship in a visual way. So we can stop sharing now, Alp, if it is okay with you. So I will go back to my verbal presentation now. So where did it leave us? So according to my analysis, what we have seen was, there were major factors that were influential in really bringing this rift between Turkey and the West, West meaning the European Union, the United States, and NATO. After I'm done with this summary of my book argument, I will bring our audience members up to date about the post-2019 developments as well. So what we see here is that the certain numbers of crises, such as Turkey's need to purchase a missile defense system, has created a significant rift in terms of significant crisis of trust between Turkey and the West. And how so? It all goes back to 2013, actually. 2013, Turkey opened up a bid for a missile defense system, because even though it was under the NATO umbrella, sometimes, there are political discrepancies with the allies, and it can really create a lag in terms of the deployment of these defense systems. So as a result of that, it opened up a bid, and a Chinese firm, a Chinese system has been given the bid, but NATO allies have raised concerns about interoperability of the missile defense system with the NATO defense systems. And as a result of that, we have seen Turkey canceling that deal with the Chinese. And fast forward a number of years later, we have seen the Turkish party engaging in negotiations with the United States, Europeans, as well as the Russians this time. And in 2017, after the coup attempt, about a year after the coup attempt, Turkey and Russia signed the agreement for Turkey to purchase S-400 missile defense system from Russia. So that was a significant rupture in the relations. Just like in the Chinese situation back in 2013, Turkey was warned by the Western allies that it would cause interoperability problems, as well as problems with the Russian infiltration into the NATO defense system networks. So that was the argument that was made by the allies, especially the United States and certain European allies as well. And as a result of that, we have seen Turkey first suspended from its participation in the F-35 Joint Striker Consortium. F-35 is an important initiative in the Western Alliance, actually. So it is the latest generation fighter jets. And so S-400s are used to detect them. So the argument made by the NATO allies to Turkey was that this is going to cause an infiltration of the Russian intelligence into the F-35s. They can gain sensitive intelligence information about the way these jets operate. And as a result of that, it is really making the alliance quite vulnerable to Russian infiltration, and it is not interoperable with the NATO systems, it was argued. And Turkish authorities in response said that, our intention is to maintain them as separate rather than, using interoperability. So we are not going to integrate them into the NATO defense systems, they said. And as a result of that, Turkish authorities constantly said that this is a done deal. This is a done deal. And as a result of that, Turkey has been removed from the F-35 Joint Fighter Consortium. time. And this is important for Turkish defense industry. Why? Because Turkey was already going to provide the motor of F-35s in a factory in Eskişehir. It cost the Turkish defense industry billions of dollars actually. So Turkey has been removed after July 2019 when the first parts have been transferred into Turkish soil. So that was after the publication of my book. So in the book, what I was saying is that there are three possible scenarios that can take place in terms of Turkey's relations with the West. What are those? Situation can be maintained as is, so continuation of status quo, which I said that is not very likely, given the significant ruptures that we were observing in the relationship. And I haven't even touched upon yet the problems in terms of Turkey and the United States not seeing eye to eye with each other when it comes to the Syrian Kurds, most importantly PYD and YPG, People's Protection Units, the Kurdish militia in the northern part of Syria. So in the fight against ISIS terrorist organization, what we have seen was the United States really prioritized the fight against ISIS, as ISIS was really gaining foothold in Syria as well as in Iraq, whereas Turkey has really prioritized its counterterrorism mission vis-a-vis PKK as well as YPG. Which the Turkish authorities argue that are organically tied to each other. PKK terrorist organization, just for the knowledge of our audience members, is recognized as a terrorist organization, not only by Turkey, but also the United States as well as the European Union. And it has caused about 40,000 loss of lives in Turkey. So Turks argue that, there is this organic tie between the YPG and the PKK, and the fact that our NATO ally, United States, is engaging in these arms provision, military support, training support, is certainly offensive, they said. So these weapons will be found in the hands of the PKK terrorists and causing further loss of lives in Turkey, was the argument that the Turkish authorities made. So there was this disconnect in Syria in terms of what the priorities should be. So should it be the removal of Assad as well as the fight against the Kurdish militia, or should it be actually the fight against the Islamic State terrorist organization? So the allies, once again, didn't see eye to eye with each other. So what we see next is that I said the improvement in the relations between Turkey and the West also doesn't seem to be too likely, I said in the book, because of the major crisis of trust between the two sides. So just to give you an example, according to a 2018 research data, about 83% of the Turkish public opinion believe that the United States was behind the coup attempt in 2016. So this is a really major issue and a major source of anti-Americanism in the Turkish public opinion. So, and here we see the United States supporting the PYD. It is really kind of like supporting that perception of the United States, that United States and the West is starting to pose an existential, threat to Turkish sovereignty, to Turkish national interest. So that we have never seen that level of a rupture in Turkey's relations with the United States. So therefore, I anticipated, unless there was a problem, the problem of S-400s being solved by the two parties, the relationship is doomed to further deteriorate. So that was the projection that I made when I submitted my book for publication in June 2019, and it came out in November 2019. So that was where we left. But ever since then, like I said, about a month later, the shipment of S-400 parts have been made to Turkey, and Turkey has been removed from the Joint Striker fighter consortium, and as a result of that we have seen further rifts. So what else took place? Before I go into that, into the updates, actually, if I have time, I would like to also tell our audience members about the 3 factors that I have identified in the book. The external factors, more or less the systemic and regional subsystemic factors. So here we see the international system is rapidly changing. It is changing from a unipolar system to a multipolar system, where the Turkish authorities actually wanted to have a fair share around the table. So there has been this aspiration to make Turkey a global player, if not a regional hegemon or a regional superpower, if not a global player. So there was this systemic type of a shift that was taking place. And it all occurred at a time when the European Union was dealing with its own crises as well. So here we have seen the Eurozone crisis, we have seen the enlargement fatigue, we have seen the refugee crisis, we have seen the rise of populism. So European Union was dealing with its own problems, which kind of gave Turkey the space to maneuver in the international system, at least in the regional subsystemic level. So that was one of the arguments, one of the factors for this change, for this increasingly boundary breaking type of behavior on the part of Turkish foreign policy. And the second factor that I have identified in the book is the domestic factors. So like I mentioned, rising anti-Western sentiments, we have seen rising nationalism, and the coalition between Justice and Development Party and the Nationalist Party, NHP, we have seen this creating this, further, furthering of the rhetoric on how the West is constituting an existential crisis, existential threat for Turkey. And on top of these 2 factors, we have certain irreconcilable national interests when it comes to Syria, when it comes to Cyprus, when it comes to some further regional issues. And these 3 factors combined together really brought us to where we were in 2019. And I am personally very saddened to see the development of the relationship, in fact, to see the further deterioration of the relationship between Turkey and the West post-2019 period. But professionally, my projections have been affirmed by the evidence of the developments that took place in the post-2019 period. So should I pause here, Ayça, or should I continue with the further developments in Turkey-US relations post-2019?
You can continue a little bit more. I don't see any questions at this time. So, and we're really, I'm personally really looking forward to hear your policy recommendations, which we promised, right?
Yes.
How can we get out of this situation? Is there a way? Perhaps you can reflect a little bit on the US policy as well, not only the Turkey side, but what maybe US can do to fix that.
Certainly. Thank you very much for this wonderful question, actually.
10 minutes or so, and then we'll turn to our audience.
Sure. So the continued support of the United States to the Syrian Kurdish components in northern Syria, as well as the S-400 rifts, really constitute a significant breaking point in the relationship. And the argument that I'm making in post-2019 environment is that there are certain institutional linkages that are so important in tying the two parties together, the United States and Turkey on one hand, and Turkey and the European Union on the other hand. So these institutional ties, I forgot to mention, in fact, that Turkey's EU membership is effectively frozen right now. So EU accession negotiations are effectively frozen right now. So this really undercuts a significant leverage that the EU has been enjoying in shaping the Turkish democracy's formation and so on and so forth. So that's one institutional tie that has received a significant blow. And the second one is the S-400s, as I argue, and as we all know from the COP26 summit meeting between Presidents Erdogan and Biden, we have seen that President Erdogan couldn't really get the response that he was looking for. And in terms of the so as a follow-up to the S-400 fallout, what happened was with Turkey being removed from the F-35 program, Turkey was in line actually to receive 100 F-35s from the consortium. So once it has been removed, and because of the defense ties and rapprochement between Turkey and Russia, the CAATSA sanctions have been implemented, so countering America's adversaries through Sanctions Act. And President Trump was really unwilling to implement them. Only about a month until the end of his tenure, he had to give in to the congressional pressure and implement some symbolic CAATSA sanctions. And so there is this payment that Turkey made to the United States, and so Turkey is trying to salvage, in a sense, some of this payment in the form of either reimbursement or since it is very clear that it cannot receive F-35s anymore, it is seeking to acquire and modernize its air force, actually, with acquiring F-16s, additional F-16s from the United States, as well as purchasing modernization kits for some of its older generation F-16 jets. So that was the reasoning for that. And since President Erdogan didn't receive the response that it wanted to receive from President Biden, there was this declaration that Turkey can purchase additional S-400s from Russia, as well as additional fighter jets from Russia in case these are not provided by the Western allies. So this is exactly the thing I was warning about: path dependency. Path dependency is a very important thing for us to pay attention, because the institutional linkages are there to regulate relationships between different international actors. And right now, we see the erosion of these institutional linkages, which is presenting a significant danger to this transatlantic relationship. So this is where I wanted to come to in terms of my policy recommendations. I think that it is of significant importance that these institutional ties are repaired. This escalating crisis of trust is really attended to in a way to try to resolve the common bilateral problems between Turkey and the United States in a more calm manner, in a more calm-headed type of a manner rather than hot-headed type of a manner, and using escalatory rhetorics, because they really make significant damages to these relationships. And it is really important for us to underline here that Turkey's relations with the West is really not comparable to Turkey's relations with any other actor in the world, be it Russia, be it China, or anywhere else. Why? Because for all these decades, Turkey has been well integrated in these institutional infrastructures. And as a result of military training, and there is these schools of thought that are really making sure that there is this coherence in terms of outlook. So they cannot be really compared to Turkey-Russia relations or Turkey-Chinese relations. And so the lack of trust certainly also exists between Turkey and Russia and Turkey and China as well. So institutional ties are the ones that really organize this relationship. So they need to be repaired is my policy advice. So let's stop this escalatory rhetoric in the bilateral relations, and let's try to calm it down. This becomes even more important given the economic crisis that Turkey is in right now. Turkish lira has lost so much of its value. Just this month, about 25% loss of value. Sorry, last month in November, we are in December now. So, which means that, you know, this type of volatile situation is going to scare the investors away. So it is important to mend the relations and make sure that we see some calming down of the rhetoric and re-emphasizing of the institutional ties between Turkey and the United States as well as the European Union. So each side, I think, need to engage in trust building activities, confidence building measures, and before the path dependent nature of this relationship ensures that the situation will further deteriorate. Like I said, if Turkey is unable to acquire these F-16s, for instance, and the modernization kits, where does it leave Turkey to? At this point in time, Turkey does not have its own, you know, its own defense industry at that level to provide these types of fighter jets. So Turkey will need to purchase them from somewhere else. And if it goes down that path, this is what path dependency is, right? So if it goes down that path further, it will make it much more difficult to, you know, mend the relations and bring it back to a better place. So let's work on that is my policy advice.
Thank you, Oya. So now the questions are raining down. I will try to combine some of them. So some people are curious to know if the state of to what extent the state of the relations are related to the current Turkish government, and they ask whether the change of government will change things, or are there certain things that even with the change of government you think will be problematic. And I want to add there, you know, I mean, we tend to think about like these problems, like, I mean, some of these problems, of course, very new, but Turkey's like more independent, search for independent foreign policy has been there for a longer time. And we have seen various incidents of that in the 70s and earlier. So what would you say about that?
So wonderful points. And I would say that we have a significantly different international system. Let me start from the back of the point that you raised here from our audience members. I would say that, you know, the system has changed. It is no longer the bipolar system, because in bipolar system during the 1970s, the superpower rivalry ensured that if you are not necessarily aligned with one, you would be aligned with the other one, and each superpower would really want to have these countries in their spheres of influence and so on and so forth. The difficulty with the current international system is that it is in flux right now. So we are in a very difficult transitional stage from unipolarity to multipolarity, and there is a lot of uncertainty right now. So which means that the countries really may not really envision and have a very long-term vision in terms of how things are going to change, how the international system will be shaped up as. So that is really causing a lot of uncertainty to smaller powers, you know, or what is referred to in the literature as middle powers. So I would argue that, and also in terms of to what extent this current crisis is related to the current government in Turkey, it is certainly undebatable that the policies that are pursued by the current government in power in Turkey have been detrimental to the health of the relationship between Turkey and the West. Having said that, it really kind of opened up the issues that we just discussed today, really opened up the Pandora's box, really, creating a lot of mistrust and grievances. So you need to work on shaping the public opinion, at least informing them accurately that, you know, the West is not there to really divide Turkey up and, you know, to put an end to its sovereignty and so on and so forth. So that type of a, you know, image problem needs to be dealt with, which is another you know, policy advice that I would need to give. For instance, I would like to make a point on that. We know that next month there will be a democracy summit organized by the Biden administration, and Turkey and Hungary are not invited. This is really significant. Because it can really break the spirit of the opposition in Turkey as well, right? So this democracy summit, just so we know, not only contains the leaders of governments, just so you know, it also includes civil society organizations and journalists and so on and so forth as well. The fact that Turkey overall is excluded from that summit really sends a really bad signal, kind of like confirming the negative image that Turks already enjoy. And, you know, Turkish society is quite polarized within itself as well. So what type of a message is it sending to the Turkish audiences is a very important question to be asked. I understand that the Biden administration wants to really make an important statement in terms of emphasizing human rights and democracy, but I think that, you know, it is important for us to see things as not necessarily black and white, but there are so many different shades there, and, you know, with our policy actions we can really alienate the portions of the society that whose support you will need in the very near future, right? So that is an important point, I think.
Another audience is curious to know about the crisis between Greece and Turkey, and whether that will lead to further deterioration between Turkey-West relations, and how would the West stand on such a crisis? The person asks.
Thank you so much. Actually, this is a question that I feel very dearly on, and that's why I am working on this book right now about the Eastern Mediterranean. So, in fact, I finished the book, the first book, by stating that if Turkey abolishes death penalty, or if Turkey were to engage in a hot conflict between with the United States in Syria, or with Greece or Cyprus in the Eastern Mediterranean, we can consider Turkey to make a switch from soft balancing to hard balancing. So it may no longer be regarded as intra-alliance opposition. In fact, it can really lead to a conflict between the allies. So, so on that point, summer of 2020 has been a very alarming year. Actually, we have come very close to seeing a hot conflict. In fact, there were skirmishes and certain clashes. But they were contained. So between Turkey and France, and Turkey and Greece. And that really raised a lot of alarm bells. NATO intervened by engaging in deconfliction mechanism. Exploratory talks between Turkey and Greece have been reinitiated after a number of years of moratorium on those. So Turkey and Greece maintain bilateral, talks right now, as well as under the NATO frameworks, in order to ensure that there won't be any hot conflict. And we see the attempts on the part of the Republic of Cyprus and Greece to drag the European Union into this conflict as well. So kind of like interinstitutional balancing type of a situation, because the Greek authorities frequently actually state that NATO is not acting in an impartial way. Turkey is a major ally, maintains the second largest military within the alliance. So, it has a slightly, Turkey favored type of a perspective, whereas European Union, as we all know, Turkey is excluded from it. So by dragging the European Union, it can use the EU leverage against Turkey. So there is that interesting institutional dynamics that we have seen. However, as we all know, the European Council summits basically came up with very symbolic sanctions against Turkey, and they have not really necessarily produced the outcomes that that was desired by the diplomats from Greece and Cyprus on that issue. More like sanctions with a teeth. And more like hard power type of a response from the EU, we haven't seen yet, because there are still certain EU member states that are sympathetic towards the Turkish position to a certain extent. Although I have to say that over the course of years, Turkey has been also extinguishing that goodwill on the part of some of the European allies as well. So with the increasing use of military in foreign policy, increased activism, and so on and so forth. Although it also has to be acknowledged that, for instance, in Libya, Turkish involvement has been really quite important in bringing an end to the civil war, and so that was quite valuable for the Western strategic interest point of view as well. So these are the issues where Turkey and Russia do not see eye to eye with each other, right? So in the Caucasus, in Syria, in Libya, in Ukraine, Turkey and Russia do not see eye to eye with each other, which really creates a certain window of opportunity, I think, for Turkey and the West to coordinate their actions, right? Just to make sure that there is stability in the region, not only in the Eastern Mediterranean, but also in the Middle East, as well as the Caucasus and Eastern Europe as well. So it is important to coordinate policy response between these parties.
Thank you, Oya. So our colleague and friend Kerem Öktem has a question. He says, first, many thanks for your presentation. He asks about who the audience recipient of your message about calmness, calm-headed, policy. He talks about the, this revolutionary fervor in the AKP government, and this sort of revisionist foreign policy is still going on. He asks, where are these actors who will be able to bring a calmer perspective to the relations with the West?
Mm-hmm. I think that it is important to have people that speak the same language. Like, for instance, in my interviews, I forgot to mention, I have conducted over 200 elite interviews, semi-structured elite interviews with policymakers, diplomats from different countries, including Turkey, Greece, Germany, United States, and so on and so forth, a lot of them. And what I have seen is that, in the beginning, there was a lot of, support for Turkish behavior, okay, we have to understand them better and so on and so forth. But there has been this alienation of the West over the course of these different policies that I mentioned, from boundary testing to challenging to breaking. And really, there is so little as a constituency in the West that are daring enough to really support and advocate for the position of Turkey. So in order to gain it back, I think regain that type of advocacy, because there were these groups, I think that it is important to bring the bureaucrats together and the technocrats together, be it military officers, be it the diplomats together, so that they can discuss these issues of common concern and come to a common agreement in terms of what needs to be done. Because guess who benefits from this lack of coordination? It is Russia. It is China, right? So you need to coordinate your action as a unified front. Otherwise, these divisions will be played and used as a political tool to undermine the coherence of the NATO alliance and the West overall. So that calm-headedness is needed in terms of bringing these technocrats and bureaucrats together, I think.
Thank you. So another question is about why the US wants to have Turkey as an ally. The person who asked the question gives examples of, different European nations that have fundamentally hostile attitude towards Turkey. Talks about, Turkey's revisionist sort of perspective, the economic and internal problems in Turkey, its rapprochement with Russia, and so forth. So what would you say about that?
I think still geographically Turkey is in an important place, but that path dependency alarm bells that I tried to ring really applies here as well. So let me tell you what happened with Germany, for instance. What happened with Germany is that they have moved their military bases from Incirlik to Jordan. So this is one example of how path dependency really works, right? So Turkey still has this important geostrategic location, right? So it is the convergence of different continents all together. It's an important passageway. It tries to promote itself as an energy hub, which really makes it a very important actor vis-a-vis Europe at the very least. right? So even as an alternative to Russian gas, for instance, so we still in the United States care about our European allies, right? So basically, that hub nature of Turkey is really very important as a way to finding alternative energy resources with different origins outside of Russia to make their way into the European continent. So this is one example, for instance. But path dependence really ensures that if Turkey continues with an uncooperating attitude, it can actually shoot itself in the foot, right? So it can undermine the important strategic importance of Turkey for the Western alliance, and allies may start to look elsewhere to build bases, like, for instance, it has been happening between Greece and the United States recently, as the Mutual Defense Cooperation Agreement has been expanded. United States is also kind of like looking for alternatives in terms of bases in the region. So Turkey is important to a certain extent, unless it kind of undermines its own leverage in a way by acting in an uncooperative type of a manner. But otherwise, in counterterrorism, I mean, I haven't even, so in counterterrorism, in terms of refugee flows, like Turkey is such a central country, right? So you cannot really do anything without incorporating Turkey into the solution. The stability in the Middle East, we know that the United States is retrenching from the Middle East, but still Middle East will constitute and actually consume some of its energy, right? So if there is instability there, the United States cannot necessarily pivot to Asia 100%, right? Because it will have implications on our European allies as well. So everything is quite interconnected and interdependent in that regard.
I quickly summarize that question. Part of the question was actually about you know, isn't that clear that, I mean, Turkey doesn't have that many options, our audience says. Isn't at the end of the day, Turkey will, you know, sort of comply with the conditions of American, I mean, he says that they can bluff, but at the end of the day, the US knows that Turkey will accept American conditions. What would you say about that?
I don't think it's a bluff. That's what I concluded in the book. Many people called it posturing. It is not posturing. So we are at the real time seeing a potential transition from soft balancing to hard balancing. I don't think it is bluffing at all. So Turkey has legitimate security concerns, right? And that needs to be acknowledged as well. So Turkey has legitimate concerns and is kind of signaling to the rest of the world that we are ready to take the next step. And it is not the step that I would personally want Turkey to take, but it is not up to me, unfortunately. So, yeah.
Thanks, Oya. Actually, I have a question. You were referring to the US like kind of retreating from the Middle East, but there's also, I mean, I know the policy that Biden's team was talking about, the pre-elections was that, but we don't necessarily see that's happening on the ground. And despite these arguments about, you know, principle, you know, politics and foreign policy based on principles, we're seeing that all these like old habits are continuing in terms of, you know, supporting, you know, Saudi Arabia, like creating new military commitments. The same with Egypt, you know, the military aid is continuing despite the brutal crackdown under LCC. So I mean, we always talk about these things from the Turkey point of view, and that's right. But what would you say about like American policy? I mean, it seems that it's in a flux now, and a lot of people are talking about how to revise it, and how that revision should be like when in relationship to Turkey.
Mm-hmm. So this is very much the case. I agree with what you have said, Ayça. I think that there is a lot of things are in flux right now, and President Biden doesn't want to really extinguish the political capital. It entertains very little of it with the U.S. Congress. So when it comes to Turkey, Turkey really doesn't constitute a priority area for the US administration right now. We know that in the previous administration, there were wonderful bilateral relations between the two leaders, but in the current administration, that is very much lacking. In fact, Antony Blinken, before he was affirmed as the Secretary of State, made a speech saying that Turkey is increasingly acting like a non-ally. So that was the perception of Turkey. But here we see, when it comes to Ukraine, for instance, Turkey has a significant role to play, I think. With the drones that it sells to Ukraine, for instance. And the other day, the NATO Secretary General made a point saying that, this time around, if Russia invades Ukraine, we will respond back. And so this is the situation that we have right now, and Turkey has the opportunity to emerge as a very important player in that situation. So that type of a balance is an important balance for the administration to maintain in its relations with Turkey, I think, because otherwise, if you alienate Turkey too much, it is going to really backfire, right, for the US strategic interests as well. So it is not only for the goodness of this relationship that the US should and Turkey should work on mending this relationship, it is for their mutual national interest as well on these evolving situations in the region, at least.
A question we have here is about Turkey's US military presence in Turkey. Can you a little bit talk about it and what that presence involves and how it changed? I mean, not throughout the whole history since the beginning of Cold War, but at least like what's happening in this new, and in the light of these new developments.
Sure. So Turkey is home to multiple NATO centers and headquarters, and one of them is the military base in Incirlik. Like I said, Germans after the coup, got really irritated and offended with the Turkish attitude when they tried to go and visit the military, German military, certain Bundestag members, I believe, tried to visit them, and there were no permission for a while. So they said, okay, this is it from us. We are going to move it to Jordan, where we don't have to deal with, this type of uncooperative attitude on the part of the Turks. And so we have NATO radars that are operating out of Turkey. That is another reason why people said that S-400s shouldn't be in the same place where we have NATO radars. And we still continue these. So Turkey is a very important contributor to NATO operations and still has important military equipment. We still have the nuclear missiles of the United States that are deployed in the Incirlik Air Base, which became a hot issue during the coup, if you may remember, where the electricity power was cut off to the Incirlik Air Base, and that raised alarm alarm bells on the part of the United States policymakers, making them kind of rethink if it is wise to have these nuclear weapons stored in Incirlik, where Turkey is increasingly acting like a adversary rather than an ally. So these are some of the debates that took place, but still to this day, the missiles are there, and to this day, NATO continues to have these headquarters and centers and radars in Turkey. And so despite these tensions, that part of the relationship has been kept intact.
All right, so this is going to be the last question, and I will try to combine actually two questions. It seems that Turkey has moved into a type of a more practical, pragmatist relationship, based on a transactional relationship rather than strategic. And what kind of consequences this will have for Turkey in the future. And perhaps a connection to that question is how will this influence the relationship with the US, and to what extent Turkey's search for alternatives and this more transactional approach is sustainable?
So that's what I also say at the end of the book. I say that this is not a maintainable type of a policy in the long run. Turkey will have to pick a side, and transactionalism is such a detrimental factor for alliances. So alliances are based on strategic partnerships, right? They go way deeper than transactional, artificial, superficial type of a relationship. So it is really detrimental to the very nature of the alliance, is what I argue. So they need to be avoided at all costs. So that's why it is important to mend the institutional linkages so that, the strategic vision can be once again unified, and you can meet each other in terms of the strategic vision for the region, if not for the global system. So transactionalism is something that the alliances should be avoiding, because there are deeper ties that tie them together, and transactionalism is basically admitting that your relationship has really become superficial, that you cannot find a common ground, which I argue should not be the case given the current situation in the Middle East, given the current situation in Ukraine. We need these actors to bring their heads together to come up with common strategic vision for these places. Easier said than done, though.
That's right. Oya, this was a wonderful talk. I learned so much. Thanks for joining us. Please go and buy Oya's book. Books are really hard to be written, so Turkey-West relations, the politics of inter-alliance opposition. And we're looking forward to your new book on the Eastern Mediterranean politics. All right, thanks for joining us, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.